The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. Before I could ask for elaboration, the scenery about me changed. It grew dull, but the wind became sharper on my face. The phoenix below me shifted and blurred and became a large orange lizard. After a moment, I recognized that I was seated on a Charizard, and there was someone behind me, supporting me so I didn't fall. I looked up and Jinichi's eyebrows raised. It was Master Lance. The champion himself had me, and I'd been brought far away from that horrible room with the Abra in it. I was too speechless to ask him anything, and there was no time anyway, since we were already passing Bell Tower. All I knew was that, somehow, while I'd been asleep, he'd found a way to locate and rescue me. "Ah, you're awake," he said, sounding relieved. "I'm afraid that there's no time to explain anything now, but I was sworn to bring you home. Regrettably, that will have to be to the local police station rather than your house, but it's the best I can do. The important thing is that you're safe as you can be." And then we landed, and he handed me over to the officers here. After briefly promising to alert my family, he left me to be processed, half awake, with my head still reeling. I noticed he was bandaged and limping a bit, but there was no time to give it any thought. Cops were leading me to different rooms, taking my picture, asking my birth date, and... Jinichi stopped and shrugged. "Well, you know the rest from there." The room was quiet, as everyone absorbed the last parts of the story. Jinichi asked the guard for a bottle of water, and by the time he came back, Gold's father had an observation to make. "You started with the Phoenix," he observed, "but you didn't have much to say about her." Jinichi thought for a moment. "I suppose I didn't," he said, sounding surprised himself. "Time worked differently with her. It felt a lot longer and more significant than I told it. After all that other stuff, I know it doesn't sound like the most memorable part, but it absolutely was." Gold just nodded. Everyone in the room, other than the guard, had been with her, and every memory was vivid. It was also very personal, and if there was more to it than Jinichi had cared to divulge, he wouldn't push the matter. "I'm just happy to have you back," he said. "Lance told me he'd find a way to get you, and somehow he made it happen." "I wonder if we'll ever know how," Jinichi groused. "I'm grateful for what he did, don't get me wrong, but he didn't bother waking me up, and when I was awake, I had about 20 seconds of explanation." Gold laughed. "He's a busy man, and he loves his secrets, but second to Spirit, he's about the best ally you could hope for." "Is he the man Spirit spoke of?" asked Gold's father, straightening beside him. Jinichi and Gold looked at him, and he scratched his temple thoughtfully. "The man who was broken, but who will be made whole again in time? I suppose that sounds like Lance, given his present wounded body, but you were wondering what you could do while locked up. Lance took you with him, all right, but only to this new, secure location." Gold and Jinichi exchanged glances, but neither had an answer for him. "It could have been Lance," Jinichi ventured. "But then why not just say his name? We all know Lance." "And she told you that you must go with him when he comes," Gold added. "But surely by then, Jinichi was already with Lance. Spirit never says anything needlessly." They paused and thought about the ramifications of the new possible meaning. "Well, just in case, be on the lookout for a broken visitor, however he ends up looking. Gold's father advised. He peered at his son nervously. You won't have to get swept up in anything again, right? The message was for Jinichi. Gold opened his mouth to assure him, closed it, and reconsidered his words. I thought I was almost done several times, he admitted. Back at the journey's start, I was ready to avoid all the trouble that I saw coming. And again, just before I got back home to Ekritik, I wanted nothing more than to quit. Then, when Silver challenged Spirit to final combat on the Whirl Islands, he thought back to the moment he'd said goodbye, and then, as Suicune bore him off over the waves, his stealing one last look at the vanishing phoenix. Life goes on, but the big story was over, right? Gold continued. I'd tell it to whoever believed it, then go back to the life I knew. I thought that, only things kept happening. The Johto League and the Rockets continued to chase me, and I could still perform miracles. Tensions in the region haven't cooled down, but are risen to the point of war, and the enemy's tactics. He looked at Jinichi. Even those haven't changed. The way that Abra was used to speak with you, lie to you, hypnotize you, while the person on the other end hid behind its face. Silver's out of the picture, but evil marches on. Gold met his father's eye, and Spirit tasked us with fighting it. His father's gaze shifted between him and Jinichi, and Gold could see the inner turmoil plaguing him. Presently, the man heaved a great, shuddering sigh. You may still be kids, he said, but you both speak like men. I suppose that's what comes of putting you through the Johto Journey at your age. Still, you shouldn't always have to— Gold! The yell in the hall, combined with the din of rapid footsteps, was enough for all to hear through the thick security door. The guard snapped to attention, but paused as Marina came into sight, checking her sprint just a few feet away from the cell. Further down the hall, another officer signaled a thumbs up. The guard relaxed and shifted aside for Marina to enter. She was out of breath, but a wild light filled her eyes as she beheld Gold. He stared back at her, momentarily dumbstruck. I knew you'd be somewhere around here, Marina cried, sounding both pleased and angry at once, but more relieved than anything. You about gave the nurse a heart attack when you suddenly popped up into the Pokemon Center and then right back out again. Out of thin air, she said. If you hadn't left that woman behind, nobody would have believed it even happened. Marina lunged forward, pulling him into a sudden iron embrace that drove all the air from his lungs. Her eyes had already begun to well with tears, and Gold could hear it in her voice as she blubbered into his left ear. What happened? Where did you go? What have you been doing? Already out of breath, Gold made a strangled sound, and Marina eased off him, but still held him with her eyes, as if afraid he would vanish if she blinked. Welcome back, said Jinichi dryly, clearly annoyed at being ignored. Looks like you get to tell it all over again, Gold.